Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at a book all about real estate finance and investment.
Sounds exciting.
You provided Deepak's little book of real estate finance and investment, and from your notes it seems like you really want to gain a solid understanding of how real estate works, like how to get started with it.
Yeah, definitely.
And all the different kinds of properties and financing options, and just get a glimpse into how the professionals approach it all.
It's a great goal to have. And I think this book is a really good place to start.
Okay, so Deepak jumps right in with this story about Tomas's. He's a merchant back in 19th century Warsaw,
Okay.
and Tomas is convinced that this up-and-coming district called Praga is going to be like the next big thing. He's like, this is it. This is where it's all going to happen.
Right.
So he puts all of his savings into a plot of land there.
Well,
But guess what? Praga didn't boom, at least not right away.
it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you found the next big thing, and then sometimes it just takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like trying to time the market is
Right.
nearly impossible.
Yeah, and what I think is so interesting about this story is that it really highlights the cyclical nature of real estate. It's not just about, like you said, getting in at the right time. It's about understanding the economic and social forces that shape the market,
That makes sense.
like government policies, infrastructure development, even things like shifting demographics.
Right.
Those can all play a role
Yeah.
in whether or not a particular location takes off as an investment.
You know, it's almost like trying to predict the weather.
Uh-huh.
Like you can look at the forecast, you can kind of see what the trends are, but there are always those unexpected factors.
Sure.
Speaking of weather, Deepak actually shares another story in the book about an investor who lost his shirt betting on a vineyard
Oh, no.
in a region where the climate just wasn't right
Yeah.
for growing grapes. He didn't do enough research, didn't do enough due diligence. Clearly, research is key.
Oh, for sure.
But how much research is enough?
That's a great question.
I mean, where do you even begin?
And, that leads perfectly into why real estate is such a popular investment in the first place. And this is something that Deepak really emphasizes throughout the book,
Okay.
is that real estate offers tangible assets. You're owning something physical,
Right.
which for a lot of people feels more secure than, say, investing in stocks. And then there's the potential for income through renting, plus the possibility of that asset appreciating over time.
Right. And let's not forget about inflation. Deepak mentions real estate as a potential hedge against inflation.
Yes.
Which is something a lot of us are thinking about these days with prices
Totally.
all over the place.
Absolutely.
But he also dives into the whole world of real estate finance. He introduces these concepts like cash flow cap rate and ROI. Now, I know we've all heard these terms thrown around,
We have.
but can you break those down in a way that, like, even if someone's completely new to real estate?
Absolutely. Let's start with cash flow. Think of it like your monthly paycheck. The money coming in from rent, minus the expenses that you have to pay to keep that property.
So mortgage payments.
Mortgage payments, taxes, insurance maintenance. If you have more money coming in than going out, that's positive cash flow.
Got it.
If you have more money going out every month, that's negative cash flow.
Okay, so positive cash flow, happy dance.
Yes.
Negative cash flow. Maybe back to the drawing board.
Exactly.
Now, what about cap rate?
Cap rate is a way to compare different properties. You look at the annual net income that a property is bringing in, and you divide that by the property's value.
Okay,
Generally, a higher cap rate means a better return on your investment.
so higher cap rate, or higher earning power.
That's right.
All right, what about ROI?
ROI stands for return on investment. It's a way to measure the overall profitability of an investment.
Okay.
So you take the profit from the investment, divide it by the cost of that investment, and then you multiply that by 100 to get a percentage.
All right, so if I buy a property for, let's say, $200,000,
Right.
and then I sell it a year later for $250,000, my ROI would be 25%. Is that right?
You got it.
Right.
That's a simplified example, of course, because you have to factor in any expenses you incurred.
Yeah.
During that year.
Of course. Okay.
But that's the general idea.
Speaking of making or losing money on those investments, Deepak tells this story about Albert, who's in post-World War II London.
Okay.
And Albert's hoping to strike it rich. So he buys this bombed-out building in a district that everyone is saying is going to be the next big thing, but things don't quite go according to plan.
Oh, no.
What happened?
Well, it sounds like Albert ignored some really important factors. He was so focused on the potential of the area that he overlooked things like the property's condition,
Right.
how much it would actually cost to fix up the building. and how long it would take for that district to really recover from the war.
It sounds like he saw Fixer Upper and thought, easy peasy.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe this connects back to our conversation about cash flow. I'm imagining that bombed out building was probably a negative cash flow nightmare.
It probably was. Yeah, it was probably costing him way more to own than it was bringing in.
So what could Albert have done differently?
Well, you could have done a much more thorough assessment of the property's condition, really factor in those realistic repair costs. He also could really analyze the demand in that area. Were people actually ready to move into a post-war zone?
Right.
He could have looked at the potential rental income versus the cost of those renovations.
Yeah.
And how long you would have to hold on to that property.
Yeah, so basically he skipped a few too many steps in his get-rich-quick scheme.
Yeah, he definitely didn't do his due diligence.
Oh.
And this story really highlights why understanding those financial concepts we talked about, like cap rate and ROI, those are so important.
Right.
It's not just about buying low and selling high. It's about really understanding those ongoing financial dynamics of a property and making sure that the numbers actually work.
You got to make sure the numbers work.
You do.
Now, Deepak takes us on a bit of a whirlwind tour of different property types.
I love this part.
Yeah. He talks about residential, commercial, industrial, and even specialized properties.
It's like picking your player in a real estate video game.
That's a great way to think about it. And each player kind of comes with its own unique set of rules and rewards and risks.
Absolutely.
Now, residential might seem straightforward, but even there you've got single-family homes, apartments, condos,
Townhouses,
duplexes.
each one catering to a different kind of need in the market.
For sure.
And then commercial properties. I mean, that could range from these bustling office buildings to...
little neighborhood strip malls.
Yeah.
The little corner store.
Right.
Or you could have a giant shopping center.
And then there's industrial properties.
Warehouses.
Yeah.
Manufacturing facility.
And then there are these specialized properties.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Deepak even mentions things like farmland and vineyards.
Oh, I love that. That's my dream.
I know, me too, actually. I think we would get along really well. Maybe we should open a vineyard together.
We should.
But before we get too carried away with those vineyard dreams, let's talk about leverage.
Ooh, yes. Leverage is so important. Deepak dedicates a whole section to this concept.
He does.
And it sounds like something that can either make you a real estate rock star or send you crashing back down to earth.
It can.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so leverage is essentially using borrowed money to amplify your returns.
Okay.
So instead of putting down all your own cash for a property, you get a loan, which lets you control a bigger asset with a smaller initial investment.
So it's like a multiplier.
It is.
It's like using a megaphone to amplify your voice. You can reach a larger audience, but it can also create a lot more noise if you're not careful.
That's a great way to put it. It can magnify profits, yes, but it also magnifies losses.
Okay.
So if the property value drops or you can't find tenants, you're still on the hook for those loan payments.
Right.
Suddenly that amplified return turns into an amplified headache.
Leverage. Use it wisely.
Use it wisely.
Or it might use you.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about the different financing options that are out there.
Okay.
Deepak covers mortgages both fixed and adjustable rates, commercial loans, and he even mentions bridge loans.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's enough to make your head spin. So let's try to break it down a little bit.
Okay.
What are the pros and cons of each of these options?
Right. So fixed rate mortgages, those offer stability, predictable payments.
Okay.
Which can be really appealing to a lot of people.
So you know exactly what you're going to be paying every month.
You do.
For the entire term of the loan.
Exactly.
Now adjustable rates.
Those can be really tempting because they start out with a lower rate, but then that rate can go up over time.
So it's a bit of a gamble.
It is. You could end up paying more in the long run if interest rates rise.
What about commercial loans?
Commercial loans tend to have shorter terms and stricter requirements than residential loans.
Okay, and bridge loans?
Bridge loans, as the name suggests, are designed to be really short term. They bridge the gap between buying a new property and selling an existing one.
Okay, and what about those government-backed options, like FHA loans?
FHA loans can be a great option for first-time buyers. They often have lower down payment requirements and more flexible credit score guidelines, which can make it easier to get into that first home.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Speaking of learning about financing the hard way, Deepak tells this story about Lisa in Brooklyn.
Okay.
She falls in love with a condo, makes an offer, and then she just goes with whatever mortgage her bank offers. without shopping around.
That's a classic mistake.
Oof, I feel like we've all been there at some point.
Yeah, it's easy to do. You're excited. You want to get things moving. You just go with what's familiar.
Right.
But not all loans are created equal.
So what happened to Lisa?
So Lisa ends up with this 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. That has a way higher interest rate than she probably could have gotten if she had just shopped around a little bit.
Ouch. That's gotta hurt.
It does. Yeah, she essentially paid a premium for convenience and for speed.
So it's a lesson in patience
and research.
Research, exactly.
Yeah.
But hold on. Didn't Lisa eventually turn things around?
She did.
How did she do that?
So she refinanced into a 15-year fixed-rate mortgage with a much lower interest rate.
Okay, so that was a good move.
It was a great move.
But why was that so helpful?
Well, this is where understanding a concept called amortization is really important.
Okay.
Amortization basically means that early on in a mortgage, a larger portion of your payments are going towards interest rather than paying down the principal.
Okay.
So with her new loan, Lisa was paying a little bit more each month, but she ended up saving a ton of money on interest over the life of that loan.
I see.
Think of it like paying off a credit card. The longer you carry a balance, the more you end up paying in interest.
Right.
So by refinancing and shortening the term of her loan, Lisa was able to save a lot of money in the long run.
Okay. I'm definitely starting to feel smarter about mortgages.
Me too.
Now things get a bit more adventurous
Whoa.
when Deepak shifts gears to the world of real estate development. He introduces this character, Thibault, an aspiring developer in post-apartheid Johannesburg, who has this vision of converting an old factory into luxury apartments.
That sounds ambitious.
It does, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like he's aiming for a serious glow-up for that old factory.
He is.
And so he jumps right in. He secures a construction loan with those tempting interest-only payments during construction.
Sounds good so far. But of course, things don't go according to plan.
Of course not. This is real estate. It's never that easy.
No, it's not.
So what went wrong?
Well, Thibault ran into a whole bunch of unexpected problems.
Like what?
Well, first of all, costs went up.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah, it's never fun when that happens. And then the real estate market actually cooled down by the time he finished the project.
Oh, no. So suddenly he's drowning in debt.
You got it.
So what could Thibault have done differently?
Well, he really highlights the importance of doing those feasibility studies, which are those in-depth analyses that help determine whether a project's financially viable before you even break ground.
So it's like checking the weather forecast before heading out on a hike.
Exactly. You want to be prepared for those unexpected storms.
Right.
Thibault's feasibility study should have included realistic cost projections, a thorough market analysis, and just a comprehensive risk assessment.
He should have had a plan B.
Yeah, he should have.
Or a plan C.
And maybe even a plan D.
Now, what about diversifying his funding sources?
That's another thing he could have done. He relied solely on that construction loan with the interest-only payments, which can be really risky, especially when the market shifts.
So he could have explored other financing options.
You could have.
Like equity investments, government-sponsored programs, maybe even some crowdfunding platforms?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's like having a diversified investment portfolio.
It is.
You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
That's right.
What about risk management in general?
Risk management is crucial at every stage of the development process.
And what kind of risks are we talking about here?
Well, there's market risk, financial risk, construction risk, regulatory risk, even political risk.
Wow, that's a lot to consider.
It is. It can feel overwhelming.
It's almost like playing a game of real estate chess, where you have to think several moves ahead to anticipate those potential threats.
That's a great way to think about it. And just like in chess, you need a strategy to counter those threats.
So Deepak highlights several strategies for managing risk.
He does.
What are some of those?
Well, the first one, and probably the most important one, is doing your due diligence. That means doing your market research, analyzing those financial projections, really looking at the regulatory requirements.
Yeah.
And then there's insurance, making sure you have the right insurance policies to cover those potential losses.
From things like natural disasters, construction accidents.
Right. Liability claims.
And performance bonds.
Yes, performance bonds are really important because they basically guarantee that the contractor will complete the project according to the agreed upon terms.
So you're protected
You are.
if they don't deliver.
Right.
What about hedging?
Hedging is another important tool. It helps minimize the impact of fluctuations. in things like interest rates or commodity prices.
Okay, so it's a way to kind of protect yourself from those market swings.
It is.
And contingency funds.
Yes, always have a contingency fund. You want to set aside money for those unexpected expenses.
For those unexpected expenses.
Or the delays that inevitably come up.
So it's all about being proactive.
Yeah.
Anticipating those what-if scenarios and having a plan in place to mitigate those risks.
That's right.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It is.
But it's worth it, right?
It is worth it. The potential rewards of successful real estate development can be huge. But you have to understand that risk is inherent in any investment.
Okay, so we've got our risk management strategies in place. What's next on our real estate development journey?
Well, let's actually dive into that development process itself.
All right.
Deepak breaks it down into 5 key stages.
Okay, I'm ready.
The first one is acquisition. That's where you identify and acquire the land or property. That's going to be used for the development. That requires you to do your market analysis, your site selection. You have to negotiate with the sellers.
Got it. Stage 2.
Stage 2 is planning and design. That's where you create the detailed plan for the project. You get your architectural designs, your engineering plans, you obtain any necessary permits and approvals.
Stage 3.
Construction. This is where the project comes to life. You hire contractors, you manage the construction process, you make sure that everything is built according to those specifications, and that you stay on budget.
Stage 4.
Marketing. Now that construction is complete, it's time to start marketing that property to potential buyers or tenants.
So that might involve hiring a real estate brokerage?
It could. Creating marketing materials, hosting open houses, engaging in various promotional activities.
Got it. And the final stage?
Stage 5, sales or leasing. This is where you negotiate and close those sales or lease agreements with those buyers or tenants.
So it's a step-by-step process.
It is. Each stage building upon the previous one.
And financing is obviously intertwined with each stage.
Absolutely.
Developers need to secure funding for each stage of the project.
That's right.
From acquisition loans to construction loans, even bridge financing.
Yeah, and each type of financing comes with its own set of terms, conditions, and risks.
It sounds like financing a development project is a very complex puzzle.
It is.
Where each piece needs to fit perfectly to create the complete picture.
You've got it.
So what are some of the key financing options that are available to developers?
Well, traditional bank loans are always an option. But developers can also explore things like private equity investments, government-sponsored programs, even crowdfunding platforms.
Crowdfunding for real estate?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It is.
I've heard of crowdfunding for things like creative projects or startups, but never for real estate.
But it's becoming increasingly popular, especially for smaller-scale developments. There are platforms like Fundrise and Realty Mogul that allow individuals to invest in those projects with relatively small amounts of capital.
So it's like democratizing real estate investment.
It is.
Making it accessible to a wider range of people?
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really opening up the market and making it possible for more people to participate.
Now, Deepak emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to financing real estate development.
There's not.
Developers often piece together funding from multiple sources, and they tailor those strategies to the specific project and market conditions.
Exactly.
So it sounds like creativity and flexibility are key.
They are really important.
Now, before we move on to the next topic, I have a quick question about feasibility analysis.
Okay, shoot.
We talked about how important these analyses are for determining whether a project's viable or not. But what exactly goes into one of these feasibility studies?
Okay. It's a really comprehensive process.
Okay.
And it involves a lot of different things.
All right, like what?
So first you have to do your market research.
Okay.
You have to understand the supply and demand dynamics in the target market. You have to identify who your target audience is. You need to look at the competitive project.
Got it.
And then there's financial analysis. You have to project your revenues and your expenses. Yeah. Estimate those construction costs and just model different financing scenarios.
Okay.
You also need to do a risk assessment. You have to look at the different risks that you're facing. How likely are they to occur? What would the potential impact be?
Okay.
Regulatory analysis is another big one. Understanding the regulatory environment, the zoning ordinances, the land use restrictions, the permitting requirements.
Got it. And
finally, sensitivity analysis. You're basically testing that financial model by tweaking various assumptions to see how those changes would impact the project's overall viability.
So it's like conducting a really thorough investigation.
It is, of the project, leaving no stone unturned.
Right.
The goal is to identify those potential deal breakers early on. So if the feasibility study shows that the project's not financially viable, or the risks are just too high, the developer can adjust the plan, or they might even decide to walk away completely.
Okay, so it's like having a safety net. That's preventing you from jumping headfirst into a risky venture.
That's right.
Now let's say the feasibility study gives the project the green light. What happens next?
Well, then it's time to start structuring those financing agreements.
Okay, so we're talking about the nitty-gritty details of the loans and investments.
Yeah.
So what are some key considerations in structuring these agreements?
Well, it's more than just getting a loan. It's about crafting those terms and conditions and arrangements to meet the needs of both the borrower, which is the developer,
Yeah.
and the lender.
Okay, so both sides need to be happy.
They do. So some key considerations would be the project scope.
Yeah.
Clearly defining what the project's about, what its objectives are.
Got it.
You also need to look at the different financing types. There's debt, equity, mezzanine financing. Choosing the right mix. For the project,
Yeah.
terms and conditions, that's where you're negotiating things like the interest rates, the loan-to-value ratios, amortization schedules, prepayment penalties. You need to have an exit strategy. How are you going to eventually recoup your investment and generate a profit? And finally, risk allocation. Clearly outlining which party is responsible for managing different types of risk.
So it's like negotiating a peace treaty.
It is.
Yeah.
Between the developer and the lender, making sure that everyone's interests are protected.
Right. And the project has a clear path to success.
Exactly.
Speaking of protecting interests, Deepak also emphasizes the importance of understanding leverage.
Yes, leverage
Cool.
and its implications in real estate financing.
We talked about leverage before.
We did?
It can amplify your returns, but it can also amplify your losses.
That's right.
So when it comes to development projects, leverage can be even more impactful.
Absolutely. Because welcome back to our deep dive into Deepak's little book of real estate finance and investment.
I'm ready for more real estate wisdom. Last time we got a taste of why real estate's so appealing, but also a reminder that you can't just jump in blindly.
You can't.
Go do your homework.
Right.
So where are we headed today?
Well, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and focus on the world of real estate appraisal and valuation.
Okay, appraisal and valuation, those often feel like the technicalities, the paperwork.
Yeah, the stuff that maybe isn't as exciting as, say, taking out a beautiful property.
Right, exactly. But Deepak emphasizes that they're actually essential
They are.
for making informed decisions, whether you're buying, selling, or even refinancing.
And to illustrate this point, he starts off with a story.
Okay, I love his stories.
This one's set in 1920s Paris.
Oh, Paris. Tell me more.
We meet René Dubois, a young, aspiring writer who falls head over heels for this picturesque townhouse in Montmartre.
It sounds lovely already.
It does. It's like the quintessential Parisian dream. But René is so captivated by the charm of the place that he skips getting a proper appraisal.
Uh-oh. That sounds familiar.
It does, doesn't it? Remember Tomas? Yeah, Elbert.
They all fell in love with the idea of a property and forgot to look at the reality.
That's right. And to make matters worse, the owner of the townhouse, Monsieur Lafarge, is very charismatic, and he plays up the property's supposed hidden gems.
Like what?
Well, he talks about a secret garden, a rooftop terrace with these panoramic views.
Ooh la. Sounds amazing.
Yes, but it turns out all those things are far less impressive in reality.
So René basically bought the Parisian dream without checking if the dream was actually real.
Exactly. He ends up stuck with this overpriced townhouse. That needs a ton of work.
And what about his writing career?
Well, his dreams of literary success get put on hold because he's struggling to make ends meet.
Poor René. It's a good reminder that accurate appraisal and valuation aren't just about protecting yourself from overpaying. They're actually a fundamental part of how the whole real estate system works.
Absolutely. Deepak points out that lenders rely on appraisals to assess risk when providing mortgages.
Makes sense.
Insurers use them to figure out coverage. Governments use them for property tax assessments.
So an appraisal really helps you understand the true market value of a property,
Just
taking into account all the factors that determine what someone's willing to pay for it.
exactly. Location, condition. Recent sales of comparable properties in the area, the whole shebang.
It's like getting a reality check
It is.
on the property's worth, making sure you're not caught up in the hype.
Right, or swayed by a smooth-talking seller.
Now, how exactly is that market value determined?
Well, Deepak breaks down the factors. that influence appraisal and valuation into three main categories.
Okay.
Physical, economic, and regulatory.
All right, so physical factors.
Those are the tangible things you can see and touch. The size and condition of the property, the location along that chip, any unique features or amenities it might have.
Right, so a bigger house in a desirable neighborhood with a pool is obviously going to be worth more than a tiny fixer-upper in a less desirable area.
Makes sense.
What about those economic factors?
Those are all about the bigger picture. Supply and demand in the local market, interest rates, job growth, even overall consumer confidence.
Okay, so those things can all affect how much people are willing to pay.
They do. It's almost like a popularity contest for houses. If there's a lot of demand but limited supply, prices are going to go up.
It's like those limited edition sneakers that everyone wants.
Exactly. They suddenly become way more valuable.
Okay, and then regulatory factors.
Those are all about the rules and regulations that govern real estate.
So we're talking about zoning laws.
Zoning laws, building codes, environmental regulations, even property tax policies, all of those things can impact the value of a property.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine you have a beautiful piece of land that's zoned for residential use only.
Okay.
And then suddenly a developer gets approval for a massive commercial project right next door.
Oh, no. This doesn't sound good.
It's not that zoning change just affected the value of nearby properties, and likely not in a good way.
It's like finding out your quiet cul-de-sac is about to become a major thoroughfare.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm feeling much more informed about appraisal and valuation.
Good, I'm glad.
But what's next on our real estate adventure?
Well, remember Hone, our ambitious developer in Rio de Janeiro. After inheriting that plot of land in Leblon, she had these grand plans, but she realized she needed some guidance.
It was like she inherited a race car, but didn't know how to drive it.
Exactly, and that's where real estate consultants come in.
Okay, so they're like the real estate driving instructors.
I like that they bring this wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
About local markets, regulations, financing options, all the things that can really make or break a development project.
So they're like the real estate whisperers.
I love that analogy. And Helena was smart to seek out that expertise. Remember Donna Sofia, that seasoned consultant who became her mentor. She helped Helena navigate those tricky zoning regulations, secure financing, and even assemble a team of talented architects who really shared her vision for those modern luxury apartments.
So Donna Sofia was the missing piece of the puzzle.
She was.
What exactly do these real estate consulting firms do?
They offer a whole range of services. Market research and analysis, financial feasibility studies, due diligence reviews, risk management strategies, valuation services. You name it, they probably do it.
So they're like the Swiss Army knife of the real estate world.
I like that. Equipped to handle all sorts of challenges.
So if you're feeling lost or overwhelmed, these consultants can be your guiding light.
They can.
But how do you actually engage with these firms?
Well, Deepak outlines a very structured and client-focused process.
Okay.
It all starts with that initial contact from the client, outlining their needs and their objectives.
So it's like going to the doctor for the first time. They need to get a full picture of your health before they can recommend a treatment plan.
Exactly. Then the consulting firm will typically schedule a consultation to dig a little deeper, ask some questions, really listen, and try to understand the client's specific situation.
Got it.
Then comes the needs assessment and scoping exercise, where the firm really defines the scope of the engagement.
So things like the objectives.
Objectives, deliverables, timeline. And then they'll develop a customized proposal, outlining their approach, their methodology, the resources they'll use, their fees.
So it's all about setting those clear expectations.
It is, from the get-go.
Making sure everyone's on the same page.
Right. Transparency and clear communication are really key at this stage.
What happens once that proposal is approved?
Then the firm will assemble a dedicated team of professionals with the expertise to handle the client's specific challenges. The project kicks off, and they keep the client in the loop, providing regular updates, reports, opportunities for feedback.
It sounds like a very collaborative process.
It is.
Which makes sense because the consultant is there to help the client achieve their goals.
Exactly. And at the end of the engagement, the firm conducts a thorough review and evaluation, seeks feedback from the client, and provides a final report.
Okay.
Summarizing those key findings, recommendations, and deliverables.
Okay, so we've explored appraisal, valuation, and consulting services. Now let's dive back into the world of real estate development.
Back to development.
I'm ready for more.
Remember Thabo, our aspiring developer in Johannesburg?
Yeah.
He had that vision of converting that old factory into those luxury apartments.
I have a feeling this is going to be another learning experience.
You're probably right. Things don't go as smoothly as Thabo had hoped.
What happened?
Well, he runs into all sorts of unexpected problems.
I feel like that's a theme in real estate.
It is.
Unexpected problems galore.
So costs balloon, the market cools down, and that vision of those luxury apartments, it starts to feel more like a financial burden.
So what are some key takeaways from Thabo's experience?
Well, first and foremost, he could have conducted a much more thorough feasibility study. Remember those in-depth analyses? That helped determine whether a project is financially viable before you even start.
Before you even break ground.
Yeah.
Thabo's feasibility study should have included realistic cost projections, a thorough market analysis, and a really comprehensive risk assessment.
Exactly. He needed to be prepared.
He needed a plan B
Yeah.
and a plan C, and maybe even a plan D. Now, what about diversifying his funding sources?
That's another really important point. He relied solely on that construction loan with those interest-only payments, which can be really risky, especially when the market shifts.
So he could have explored other financing options.
You could have.
Equity investments, government-sponsored programs, maybe even some of those crowdfunding platforms.
Right.
Okay, so it's like having a diversified investment portfolio.
It is. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Okay, what about risk management in general?
Well, Deepak emphasizes that risk management is crucial at every stage of the development process.
Okay, and what kind of risks are we talking about here?
Well, there's market risk, financial risk, construction risk, regulatory risk, even political risk.
Wow, that's a lot to keep track of.
It is. It can be overwhelming.
It's like playing a game of real estate chess.
Yeah.
You have to think several moves ahead to anticipate those potential threats.
You do.
So Deepak highlights several strategies
He does.
for managing risk.
Yeah.
What are some of those?
Well, the first one, and probably the most important one, is conducting thorough due diligence. That means doing your market research, analyzing those financial projections, carefully assessing those regulatory requirements.
Okay.
And then there's insurance. You have to make sure you have the right insurance policies to cover those potential losses.
From things like natural disasters, construction accidents.
Yes. Liability claims.
What about performance bonds?
Performance bonds are a great tool. They essentially guarantee that the contractor will complete the project according to the agreed-upon terms.
So you're protected.
You are. If they don't deliver.
What about hedging?
Hedging is another important tool. It helps minimize the impact of fluctuations in things like interest rates or commodity prices.
So it's like a way to protect yourself from those market swings.
It is.
Okay, and finally, contingency funds.
Always have a contingency fund. You want to set aside money for those unexpected expenses or delays.
Because there are always unexpected expenses.
There are.
And delays in real estate.
That's the nature of the beast.
Right? It never goes exactly according to plan.
It doesn't.
So it's all about being proactive.
It is.
Anticipating those what-if scenarios and having a plan in place.
That's right. To mitigate those risks.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
But it's worth it.
But it is worth it. The potential rewards of successful real estate development can be huge.
But you have to understand that risk is inherent in any investment.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got our risk management strategies in place.
We do.
What's next on our real estate development journey?
Well, now that we understand the importance of feasibility studies and risk management, let's actually dive into that development process itself.
Okay, let's do it.
So Deepak breaks it down into 5 key stages.
5 key stages, I'm ready.
The first one is acquisition. That's where you identify and acquire the land or property you're going to use for the development.
So you find the perfect spot.
You do your market analysis, you do your site selection, you negotiate with the sellers.
Right. Stage 2?
Stage 2 is planning and design. This is where you create the detailed plan for the project.
So the blueprints, the architectural drawings.
Yes. You obtain any necessary permits and approvals.
Stage 3.
Construction. This is where the project comes to life. You hire your contractors. You manage the construction process. You make sure everything's built according to those specifications. And on budget.
Right. Stage 4?
Marketing. Construction is complete. Now it's time to start marketing that property to potential buyers or tenants.
So you might hire a real estate brokerage.
You might create marketing materials, host open houses, engage in those promotional activities.
And the final stage?
Stage 5, sales or leasing. This is where you negotiate and close those sales or lease agreements. with those buyers or tenants.
Okay, so it's a very step-by-step process.
It is.
Each stage building on the previous one.
That's right.
And of course, financing is intertwined with each stage.
Absolutely.
Developers need to secure funding for each stage.
That's right.
From acquisition loans to construction loans to bridge financing. And each type of financing comes with its own set of terms, conditions, and risks.
You got it.
It sounds like financing a development project is a very complex puzzle.
It is a complex puzzle.
Where each piece needs to fit perfectly to create the complete picture.
Absolutely.
What are some of the key financing options available to developers?
Well, traditional bank loans are always an option, but developers can also explore things like private equity investments, government-sponsored programs, even crowdfunding platforms.
Crowdfunding for real estate.
Yeah.
I'm still wrapping my head around that one. I've heard of crowdfunding for things like creative projects or startups, but never for real estate.
It's becoming increasingly popular, though, especially for smaller scale developments.
So there are platforms like Fundrise and Real and Mogul.
Those are two of the big ones.
Yeah.
That allow individuals to invest in real estate projects with relatively small amounts of capital.
So it's like democratizing real estate investment, making it accessible to a wider range of people.
Exactly.
Now, Deepak emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach
There isn't.
to financing these development projects. Developers often piece together funding from multiple sources.
That's right.
And they tailor those strategies to the specific project and market conditions.
It's all about being flexible.
Creativity and flexibility are key.
They are.
Now, before we move on, I have a question about feasibility analysis.
Okay.
We talk about how important they are for determining whether a project's viable, but what exactly goes into one of these feasibility studies?
It's a comprehensive process.
Okay.
It involves a lot of different factors.
All right, give me the rundown.
First, you have to do your market research.
Okay.
Understanding those supply and demand dynamics. Identifying your target audience. Analyzing those competitive projects.
Okay, so you're really getting to know the market.
You are.
Yeah.
And then you've got financial analysis, projecting your revenues and expenses, estimating those construction costs, modeling those different financing scenarios.
Okay, so you're crunching those numbers.
You are.
You're making sure that it financially makes sense.
Exactly.
Then there's risk assessment.
Yes. Identifying and assessing those different risks. How likely are they to occur? What would the potential impact be?
Regulatory analysis?
Yes, regulatory analysis is a big one. Understanding the regulatory environment.
Zoning ordinances?
Zoning ordinances, land use restrictions, permitting requirements, sensitivity analysis, testing that financial model by tweaking various assumptions, and seeing how those changes would impact the project's viability.
So it's like conducting a thorough investigation.
It is.
Leaving no stone unturned.
That's right. And the goal is to identify those potential deal breakers early on.
Okay.
So the feasibility study reveals that the project's not financially viable, or the risks are just too high. The developer can adjust the plan. Or they might even decide to walk away.
Okay, so it's like having a safety net.
It is a safety net.
That's preventing you from making a costly mistake.
Exactly.
Now, let's say the feasibility study gives the project the green light. What happens next?
Well, then it's time to start structuring those financing agreements.
Okay, so we're talking about the nitty-gritty of those loans and investments. So what are some key considerations in structuring those agreements?
It's more than just getting a loan. It's about really crafting those terms and conditions and arrangements to meet the needs of both the borrower, which is the developer, and the lender.
So both sides need to be happy.
Absolutely.
So what are some of those key considerations?
First, you have to clearly define the project scope. What's the project about? What are its objectives?
Okay.
Then you have to understand the different financing types. You've got debt, you've got equity, you've got mezzanine financing. Choosing the right mix for that particular project.
Terms and conditions.
Terms and conditions are a big one. You're negotiating things like the interest rates, loan-to-value ratios, amortization schedules, prepayment penalties.
And, of course, the exit strategy.
Right. How are you going to eventually recoup that investment? Generate a profit.
And risk allocation.
Yeah, risk allocation is really important. Who's responsible for managing what types of risks?
So it's like negotiating a peace treaty.
Exactly.
Between the borrower and the lender.
Making sure that everyone's interests are protected and that the project has a clear path to success.
Now, Deepak also emphasizes the importance of understanding leverage.
Leverage.
We talked about leverage before.
It did.
That powerful tool that can either amplify your returns or amplify your losses.
That's right. And when it comes to development projects, leverage can be even more impactful. It allows those developers to control larger projects with less of their own capital.
Which could potentially boost their profits?
It could.
But of course, leverage also magnifies risk.
It does?
If the project faces setbacks or the market takes a downturn, those loan payments can quickly become a burden.
Absolutely.
It's like walking a tightrope. The higher you climb, the greater the potential reward, but also the greater the potential for a fall.
And Deepak stresses that understanding your debt-to-equity ratio is really important.
Okay, so debt-to-equity ratio.
This ratio basically measures
Right.
how much of the project is being financed with debt versus equity.
Okay.
And it's a key indicator of financial risk.
So a higher debt-to-equity ratio means the developer is using more leverage.
That's right.
Which could increase potential returns, but also increase the risk of financial distress.
Absolutely.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
It is.
Using leverage strategically to boost returns, but also managing that risk effectively.
Exactly. And that wraps up part 2.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground today. From the tale of Renee and Paris to the high-stakes world of real estate development, we've explored appraisal valuation, consulting services, the intricacies of financing those ambitious projects, and we've learned about the importance of due diligence.
Due diligence is key.
Risk management, feasibility studies, making informed decisions based on solid research and analysis. Join us in part 3, where we'll continue exploring the fascinating world of real estate. We'll be delving into some more specialized topics, like corporate real estate management, real estate investment funds, and even some advice for individual investors.
So until then, reflect on what's resonated with you most from part 2. What insights have maybe sparked your curiosity or challenged your assumptions?
We'll see you in part 3. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Deepak's little book of real estate finance and investment.
I can't believe we're already here.
It feels like we've journeyed across continents and explored historical markets and learned a whole new language of financial terms.
We have.
I'm definitely feeling more confident in my real estate knowledge.
Me too.
So what adventures await us in this final leg of our journey?
Well, in this last section, Deepak guides us through some more specialized areas of real estate. We'll talk about managing those massive corporate portfolios, navigating the world of real estate investment funds. And he even offers some advice for us individual investors.
Perfect timing, because after all this, I'm ready to upgrade my real estate knowledge resume. So where do we start?
Okay, well, Deepak kicks things off with a story about corporate real estate management.
Okay.
Imagine you're Sarah. She's the CEO of a tech company in Chicago.
Right.
And her company's facing some tough times. That fancy office space they have on Michigan Avenue, negotiated back in the good old days of the tech boom, is now a financial drain.
High rent, shrinking budget. Not a good combination.
That's not.
So what are your options when you're stuck in a lease that's no longer working for you?
Well, that's the dilemma Sarah's facing. Relocating hundreds of employees would be a nightmare. Disrupt the entire workflow.
Yeah.
Renegotiating with a powerful landlord in a prime location. Well, that feels like trying to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops.
Okay, so what does Sarah do? Declare corporate real estate bankruptcy, move everyone into her basement.
Not quite. She remembers a presentation she saw about a corporate real estate management company called Vertex.
Vertex?
They take a holistic approach to managing those massive real estate portfolios.
Interesting.
So Sarah reaches out, and Vertex quickly identifies the problem.
What is it?
Apex is paying a premium for space. They're not even fully utilizing.
It's like buying a jumbo pizza when you only want a couple of slices.
That's a great analogy.
So what's the solution?
Well, Vertex proposes a two-pronged strategy.
Okay.
First, they want to renegotiate that existing lease, armed with data about Apex's actual space needs, and then, simultaneously, they want to start scouting for alternative spaces.
Okay, so a bit of tough love, a dose of reality, and a sprinkle of creativity.
Exactly, and, those negotiations are tough. But Vertex's expertise and Sarah's determination really pay off. They managed to secure a lower rent, a smaller footprint, and a more flexible lease agreement. And then Vertex helps Apex find a fantastic new space.
Oh, I like that.
A refurbished industrial building in this revitalized neighborhood that really suits their company culture and their budget.
So it's a win-win.
It is a win-win.
They traded in that jumbo pizza for a delicious artisanal pie. Smaller, more flavorful, a much better fit.
And that's precisely what corporate real estate management is all about.
So it's about aligning those real estate assets with the business goals.
It is.
It's about optimizing portfolios, overseeing leases and acquisitions.
Managing facilities and
Exactly.
fostering those relationships with stakeholders.
So it's more strategic than just picking out a cool office space with a ping pong table.
Way more strategic.
It's about understanding how real estate impacts a company's bottom line.
And using it as a tool to enhance productivity, to attract talent, even to project a certain image.
So what are some key strategies for optimizing those corporate real estate assets?
Okay, well, Deepak highlights several strategies.
I'm listening.
First, you've got space utilization studies, analyzing how that space is actually being used. This can reveal inefficiencies and opportunities to maybe reduce that square footage.
Which saves money.
Yes, saves money on rent and operating expenses.
Workplace design.
Workplace design is really important. You want to create these flexible and collaborative environments that boost productivity and employee well-being.
So we're talking open floor plans.
Open floor plans, shared workspaces, huddle rooms for team collaboration, quiet zones for focused work.
That makes sense. What else?
Well, there's technology integration.
Okay.
Utilizing those smart building technologies to monitor and control things, like the lighting, the temperature, security system.
Leading to energy savings.
Yes. And improved operational efficiency.
And sustainability.
Sustainability is a big one. Yeah. Implementing those sustainable building practices.
Those green buildings.
Green buildings.
They often attract tenants.
They do. They can command higher rents. And of course, they have a positive impact on the environment.
So it's a mix of being practical,
Yeah,
innovative, and mindful of the bigger picture.
it is.
And then there's the age-old question.
Oh, what's that?
Lease or own?
Ah, yes. That is the question.
It's a question I've pondered myself when it comes to my own living situations. So what's the verdict?
Well, there's no easy answer. It really depends
On what?
on the organization's financial situation, their long-term goals, even the market conditions.
So leasing offers flexibility,
Yes.
lower upfront costs, but owning gives you more control and that potential for long-term appreciation.
It's like choosing between renting a stylish apartment or taking the plunge and buying your dream home.
Both have their pros and cons.
They do.
And just like with our personal real estate decisions, making the right call for a company requires careful analysis.
Understanding your risk tolerance
Yeah.
and a long-term perspective.
Okay, now let's talk about real estate investment funds.
All right.
They sound a bit like a mysterious club for the real estate elite.
Well, they're not as exclusive as you might think.
Okay, good to know.
Real estate investment funds essentially pool money from multiple investors to purchase and manage a diversified portfolio of properties.
So it's like a team effort.
It is.
Everyone contributes to the pot, and everyone shares in the potential profits or losses.
Exactly like a real estate potluck.
Everyone brings something different to the table, and hopefully everyone enjoys a delicious meal.
I like that analogy.
So Deepak explains that there are different types of real estate funds.
There are.
What are some of those?
Well, you've got REITs, real estate investment trusts.
Okay.
Those are publicly traded companies that own and operate income-producing real estate.
So things like shopping malls.
Shopping malls, office buildings, apartment complexes.
And REITs offer investors liquidity,
They do.
meaning you can easily buy and sell those shares.
And they provide diversification.
What other kinds of funds are there?
Well, there are private equity funds.
Okay.
Those are typically open to accredited investors, and they have a long-term investment horizon. They often target properties that need more active management or that have the potential for significant value appreciation.
And then there are hedge funds.
Hedge funds are known for their more aggressive investment strategies. They often use leverage and those complex financial instruments to potentially generate higher returns.
But also higher risks.
Absolutely.
So it's like choosing your level of risk and reward. REITs are the more stable, accessible option, while hedge funds are for those who like to live on the edge.
Yeah, if you like a little bit of a roller coaster ride.
What about the different investment strategies that these funds use?
Deepak outlines three main strategies.
Okay.
Core investment.
Core investments.
Those are those safe and steady investments, those stable income-producing properties in those well-established markets.
So like the blue chip stocks of the real estate world.
Exactly.
Well,
Value-add investments.
Value add.
Those target properties that need a little bit of TLC.
So maybe some renovation.
Renovations, repositioning, maybe improved management to increase their value and generate those higher returns.
So like those fixer-upper houses.
Yeah.
That have the potential to be real gems.
Exactly.
What's the third strategy?
The third strategy is opportunistic investments.
Opportunistic.
These are those higher risk, higher reward ventures. They often involve distressed properties, complex developments, emerging markets.
So like those adventurous startups, that could either skyrocket or crash and burn.
You got it.
There's a whole spectrum of options here, from playing it safe to taking a gamble on those high potential properties.
But with all these choices, how do you know which fund is right for you?
That's a great question.
That's where due diligence comes in.
Deepak is all about due diligence.
It is.
So what does that involve when it comes to these investment funds?
You need to vet those potential investments carefully. You have to analyze those market conditions, assess the risks, monitor the portfolio's performance.
So it's about making sure that the fund aligns with your goals and your risk tolerance.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm feeling like I have a good grasp on these investment funds, but what about us regular folks who aren't part of some elite investment club? Does Deepak offer any advice for individual investors?
He does. Like me, who are looking to dip their toes into the real estate market.
I'm all ears.
Okay, well, he starts off with a cautionary tale
Another one.
about Coral,
Okay.
a young Atlantean, who gets caught up in the hype of a new coral reef development.
Wait, a coral reef developed?
Yes.
Are we talking about underwater condos?
We are.
This is amazing.
It's Deepak's creative way of illustrating the point that even in a seemingly exotic market, those fundamental principles of real estate still apply.
So what happened to coral?
Well, Coral learns the hard way that securing a property is just the first step.
Okay.
You have to understand that entire ecosystem,
So the location.
the location, the infrastructure, future development plans, the reputation of the developer. All those factors play a role in determining whether an investment will flourish or flounder.
So even if you're buying into a piece of paradise, you need to do your homework.
You do.
What other advice does Deepak offer?
Well, he outlines several key considerations. First, financial readiness.
Okay.
Assess your current financial situation.
So income, savings, debts, credit score.
The whole 9 yards.
Figure out what you can realistically afford, how much risk you're comfortable taking on.
Exactly.
What else?
Then define your investment goals.
Okay, so are you seeking long-term appreciation, rental income, a combination of both?
Whatever it is, you need to define it clearly because that's going to guide your property search.
What else?
Market knowledge.
Research local markets.
Research those local markets.
Understand supply and demand dynamics.
Yeah.
Identify those areas with strong potential for growth.
Right.
Property-specific factors.
Consider the location, the type, the size, the condition, the age of the property.
Okay.
All of those factors will impact its value.
What about risk management?
Risk management is always important.
Yeah.
You need to understand the risks involved and develop strategies to mitigate those risks.
So diversifying your portfolio.
Diversifying your portfolio, securing adequate insurance, having a contingency plan for those unexpected expenses
Right.
or market downturns.
So it's like creating a personalized real estate roadmap.
It is.
Taking into account your financial situation, your goals, and your risk tolerance.
And Deepak also emphasizes that real estate investing is not just about numbers.
It's not.
It's not, you have to consider those personal preferences, lifestyle considerations.
So things like, do you want to be a hands-on landlord? Or would you prefer a more passive approach?
Are you looking for a property in a specific neighborhood with good schools or certain amenities? All of those things can impact your overall satisfaction with the investment
So it's about finding a property that aligns with your lifestyle.
and your vision for the future.
Now let's talk financing.
Okay.
What are some of the options available to individual investors?
Well, traditional mortgages are still the most common way to finance those real estate purchases.
So Deepak explains the difference between fixed rate and adjustable rate mortgages.
He does.
And he highlights those government-backed programs,
Like FHA loans.
which can be helpful for first-time homebuyers.
They can.
He also mentions some alternative financing options.
Seller financing, private loans, hard money loans.
Those can be helpful in specific situations.
But they often come with higher interest rates and less favorable terms.
Okay, so it's good to know there are options out there. But before we sign on the dotted line, what about due diligence?
Due diligence is so important, especially for individual investors.
So how can individual investors protect themselves from making costly mistakes?
Well, Deepak is a huge advocate for due diligence.
Yeah.
He stresses the importance of reviewing the seller's financial records,
Okay.
so their income and expense statements, making sure that those numbers actually add up.
Makes sense. What else?
Property inspection. getting a professional inspector to really examine that property, identify any potential problem,
Or needed repairs.
and neighborhood research, really researching the neighborhood.
Understanding property values.
Property values, crime rates, school quality, all those factors that might impact your investment.
And an appraisal.
Yes, always get a professional appraisal to make sure that you're not overpaying.
So it's like being a real estate detective, carefully gathering all the evidence before making a decision.
And he also advises having a contingency plan, just in case things don't go as expected.
So what if you lose your job? Or face a major unexpected repair?
You need to have that financial buffer, that backup plan.
It's like packing an umbrella, just in case those real estate skies open up and start pouring rain.
I like that.
And finally, Deepak reminds us that seeking advice from experienced professionals,
Yes.
like real estate agents, attorneys, financial advisors, that can be invaluable.
Especially for first-time investors
Yeah.
who are navigating unfamiliar territory.
They can help you avoid those costly mistakes
It can.
and make those informed decisions that align with your goals.
Exactly.
It's like having a team of real estate superheroes by your side, guiding you through the challenges and celebrating those victories.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive
Into
into Deepak Kapsa's little book.
of real estate finance and investment. We've covered so much ground today.
We have.
From those historical roots of real estate to those complex worlds of financing, investment strategies, we've met those fascinating characters,
Yeah.
learn those valuable lessons, gain those practical insights that can help us navigate this ever-changing world of real estate.
And whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, we encourage you to continue exploring this world of real estate finance and investment.
Armed with the knowledge you've gained, you're ready to embark on your own real estate adventure.
You are.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.